All right, everyone, welcome to the Tonto's Demise week. What is it? Week 12? Week 12 recap. Uh, I'm not even sure what to say. I think it's kind of funny that here I'm looking at the Yahoo list of matchups from week 12, and all of the winners are on the right side of the matchup listing. All the losers are somehow on the left side. Oh man, where do I begin? We had two matchups, as you know, who the loser of that matchup was done for the year officially, being moved to 8 losses, and no way you can make the playoffs. And one of them was the defending champion, Springfield Isotopes. I'll pause here for everyone to clap and cheer. All right. Hopefully you got enough. You got enough in there, because I have a long laundry list of unfinished business to go through. I've got a long list of names here who I'm just basically gonna give a blanket fuck you to all of these players. So here, let's run through the lists. First of all, I've already mentioned these guys before. Tyreek Hill, the 1 week I started you got me 4 points. And the week before you had 20-something, the week after you had 20-something. You just went off for 30 points the other night. So thank you. Well, no, thank you. Fuck you for that 4-point performance that you gave me. Of course, we had Marquise Lee, who got me 1 point the week that I picked him up and used him, versus Disco. In between, I think he was average. He had a couple games where he was over 15, 18, something like that. And also, it takes me right to another play from the Jacksonville Jaguars while I'm at it. In that same matchup, we had Alan Hearns going for Disco, who scored 23 points that week. The highest point total he's had in any other week this year has been 12. And he scored 23 that week. So fuck you, Alan Hearns. Next, of course, we have Brandon Cooks, who scored 0 this week. In my, let's see, I'm going to scratch off some names here as I go through the list. So we had Brandon Cooks scored 0 this week. Fuck you, Brandon Cooks, for not showing up in a game where your team scored 50 points. And you didn't even get... Fuck you, Drew Brees, for not even targeting the guy once. What's going on? So 0 from Brandon Cooks. And also, I hate to say this, but fuck you, DeMarco Murray, for leading me on all season long. Great games, 20 points a week. And then this week, you have you picked this week in my time of need, my most dire moment, and you get me 4 points. Fuck you, DeMarco Murray. God damn it. I love you and I hate you, but fuck you this week. Oh, what's next? Fuck you, Kansas City Chiefs defense, for getting me, I think, 2 points the week that you played the Steelers. I was even there, and I had to watch it. Oh, God. You couldn't get 1 sack. You couldn't get 1 turnover. I lost the game by 6, I think. And you got 2 points. I mean, it's by far your worst performance of the whole year. So fuck you, Chiefs defense. And then not only that, but I went against you this week because you were at Denver. I went with Buffalo. And if I had gone with you, you would have won. I would have won this week and still be fighting for a playoff spot. So also, I guess I should say fuck you, Buffalo Bills defense, for just absolutely tanking. Even though you won the game, your defense, you were miserable against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Come on, you're at home. It's almost December. You're playing a Florida team. You let Blake Bortles run for like 90 yards. Like, what the fuck? God damn it, Buffalo. Oh man, where would we go from here? Eagles defense. No, first. Okay, we'll just go with that. Eagles defense. Fuck you. In my 1.5 point matchup against Jimmy. Well, maybe it's not, Eagles defense and Bears defense, because I'm thinking about this. Bears defense, I guess it might not just be the Eagles defense. It's the Eagles team in general. Fuck you, Philadelphia Eagles, because at the end of that game, with like 2 or 3 minutes left, you went for it on, 4th down and 6 or 4th down and 8? You fucking went for it instead of kicking the field goal or punting or whatever, doing whatever. I think you were close enough to kick a field goal. But they went for it, and not only did they go for it on, 4th and 8, but fuck you, Chicago Bears defense, for letting them get it. And then they ran the clock out. If you would have just gotten the ball back, and obviously you would have had to be throwing to catch up in that last 2 minutes of garbage time, all I needed was 20 more yards of passing to knock Jimmy down 3 points from passing yard totals and getting me the win. So fuck you, the entire Philadelphia... I almost said Philadelphia Phillies. The entire Philadelphia Eagles team and the Chicago Bears defense. Fuck both of you. And then we had Graham Gano. Also, fuck you, because you scored 19 points that week. So those guys say the kickers don't matter. Well, kickers certainly mattered that week, because 19 points. I think his best performance of the whole year. One less point said for that matchup. Fuck you. God damn it, Graham Gano. And then, in another loss, we had, fuck you, Michael Crabtree, catching 3 touchdowns that week. I gotta check and see if that was your best week of the season. I'm guessing it probably was. Crabtree, real quick. Yeah, that was Michael Crabtree's best week of the whole year by 10 points, by a little bit more than 10 points. So fuck you, Michael Crabtree, because that 3rd touchdown was the 6-point margin of victory between me and Jay that week. And also, this is the same week as the Chiefs defense versus Pittsburgh. But also, fuck you, Will Fuller, for doing shit all year long, except that 1 week where you ran a punt return back for a touchdown, a long touchdown, and getting Jay an extra 9 points and costing me a win there in that 6-point matchup. Fuck you. So fuck you, Will Fuller. Next, where do we go? All right, we've got Miami Dolphins offense. Fuck you, Miami. Fuck you, Jay Ajayi, for coming out of nowhere, having those 200-yard rushing performances back-to-back, and make basically just the Miami Dolphins offense deciding that here's what we're going to do for the rest of the year. We're just going to either throw long passes down the field to Kenny Stills or Devontae Parker to stretch out the defense, and either that or we're going to just hand it off to Jay Ajayi. So we're going to throw those long passes to open up the field, stretch the defense a little bit for the running game, and it's just going to be that and Ajayi. Sorry, Kevin. Ajayi the rest of the year, making Jarvis Landry fantasy irrelevant. He was so good last year. He literally averaged 18 points. He was money every week for 15 to 18 points at least, if not more than that last year. And he's been a steady 6 to 8 point scorer ever since Jay Ajayi took over here. So fuck you, Jay Ajayi, fuck you, Devontae Parker, fuck you, Kenny Stills, fuck you, Ryan Tannehill, and the entire Miami Dolphins offense. Fuck you, Josh Gordon, for not getting your shit together. Fuck you for looking so good in the preseason, and then days before you're getting back from your suspension, you check yourself into rehab. I mean, you couldn't do it weeks before. You had to wait until the last day before you're coming back. Fuck you, Josh Gordon. Next, my matchup versus Detling. I don't know that, well, it was close. It was winnable. Fuck you, Chris Hogan. You had your best game of the whole year. Even though you only caught 4 passes, they were all 30-yarders, if not more. You had 114 yards on your 4 catches. Your best game of the year. Fuck you, Chris Hogan. Fuck you, Tom Brady, for only throwing a bunch of long, deep passes to Chris Hogan that week. And then also, fuck you, Greg Olsen, for having almost 200 yards passing, not 200 yards passing, 200 yards receiving on 9 catches that week. I'm pretty sure by far his best game of the whole year. In the past couple, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, I needed him to score like 13 or less that week, which he's been doing pretty consistently the past few weeks. But no, he went off for 30 points when I needed him to score 13. So fuck you, Greg Olsen. And also, that was the week where Cam Newton did not play, and Derek Anderson was the quarterback, and they played Tampa Bay. If I remember correctly, I think it was Tampa Bay. So fuck you, Tampa Bay defense, for knowing that Greg Olsen was going to get all the passing targets in that game, and you still decided not to cover him. Fuck you, Greg Olsen, and fuck you, Tampa Bay defense. Next, we had Spencer Ware, right after I traded for you. I'm not mad at you. I can't be mad at you, Spencer Ware. I'm more mad at the Colts defense for that week, because not only did they concuss you, they concussed Alex Smith possibly twice in that game. And I think I mentioned this before, that if you watched that game, the guy who concussed Alex Smith by knocking his head into the ground, pretty much, I don't know if it was intentional, but he took 2 hands, put him on Smith's helmet, and basically shoved his head right into the ground. I mean, I don't want to say it was intentional, but it's just ridiculous. And said they knocked Spencer Ware out early in that game. I think that game was 8 or 9 point difference there, and he'd already been doing pretty well until he got knocked out. So fuck. Spencer Ware, you missed a couple weeks. You've been mediocre ever since too. So you know what? Fuck you anyway, Spencer Ware, and but extra fuck you to the Indianapolis Colts defense for knocking him out that week. We had some matchup problems too. That I don't know if that was that same week or not. Might have been later, but actually this might have been against Kevin. I can't remember. But fuck you, Robert Woods, for me not using you because you were hurt. You were questionable. I wasn't sure if you were going to play or not. And I don't think you played until, I think it was the Monday night game. And so I didn't use you. And you were at Seattle. At Seattle. Who's going to start a receiver going to Seattle, especially on an offense like Buffalo? And you scored 30 points that week. Robert Woods. And that 30-point difference, if I had started you instead of one of my other guys, I think it was Cobb who was also hurt, or maybe not playing, or I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Tyreek Hill. I can't remember. It's all a blur now, but yeah, Robert Woods, you scored 30 points at Seattle. Actually the points that you scored, if I had started you, would have covered the difference between, I want to say it was me and Dub Seahooligans that week. You would have covered the difference and gotten the win. So, fuck you, Robert Woods. Next, we've got J.J. Nelson. Fuck you, J.J. Nelson. As soon as the Cardinals announced that they're going to put you as the number 2 receiver behind Larry Fitzgerald, you had a great game right before that. I think you scored about 20 points. And ever since you got promoted, you've done absolutely jack shit. Nothing. I thought, all right, here's a guy who's going to step up, and maybe I can plug him in for some of my other receivers who are sucking this year. I could plug in J.J. Nelson. He's going to get me points every week. Nope. J.J. Nelson, fuck you. Too much pressure, I guess, from being a starting wide receiver. Maybe they should go back to putting you as the number 3 guy. Next up, these two guys both had their best games of the entire season this week. It was Delanie Walker and Allen Robinson. Fuck both of you guys. You had your best weeks of the whole year against me, of course. Even Delanie Walker even caught a touchdown pass from my guy, DeMarco Murray, even though that was a pretty significant margin of victory in that matchup, and I'm not sure I would have won it anyway. Let's take a quick look back and see. Oh yeah, it was like a 50 point margin of victory. But then again, if you take away those huge games from Walker and Robinson, this one might have been at least a lot closer, if not winnable. So fuck you, Allen Robinson, and fuck you, Delanie Walker. And next we have, fuck you, I hate doing this, but fuck you, Randall Cobb. As soon as you gave me a glimmer of hope that you were going to come back and you were going to do well, you had like 2 really good games, and then you got hurt. In practice, not even in a game, in practice. You got hurt, you sat out like 2 weeks, and you led opening up the door for Davante Adams to just go off, which he's been riding that ever since. So I think I said this maybe I don't know if I said this during the podcast last week, but fuck you also, Davante Adams, for having, as soon as I dropped you, you decided to have the best stretch of games your entire career so far. And Cobb has never gone back. He said Davante Adams hasn't looked back. And Randall Cobb has kind of been left in the dust here. And finally, the last thing for this past week in the clinching knockout matchup here was, so I talked about these guys versus Robert Woods, but again, fuck you, Seattle Seahawks defense. Just like Tampa Bay's defense, you knew that Mike Evans is the only player that Jameis Winston he's going to throw to, and you let him get 2 touchdowns. You let Evans get 2 touchdowns in the first quarter of that game, and he ends up getting 30 points. 30! God fucking damn it. If you had held him to 17, I would win. Seattle, you're a good defense. You know that he's gonna force the ball to Mike Evans. Like, come on. And even you can't stop him. You let him go off. I mean, I think they did actually slow him down after that, but the first quarter, I think 20, I want to say 22 or 23 of Mike Evans' 30 points all came in that first quarter where you gave up 2 touchdowns to him. So fuck you, Seattle Seahawks defense. Oh. I've got one last thing on here on my list of things that I'm pissed off about, but I will get into it because the first matchup is my Springfield Isotopes, the Volchko Squasher. Was squashed by Volchko. The Springfield Isotopes, the defending champions, is the first matchup we always do each week. No longer will be the first match. Obviously, they will not be the first team we talk about every week next year, as we are now eliminated at the hands of the Detonators. The score this week was 144.3 to 132.9. Now, 11.5 point margin of victory. Now, here's the interesting thing. Kelvin Benjamin had 0 points for most of that game, and he caught a 44-yard touchdown as Carolina was trying to make their big comeback in that game. He did actually end up with 1 more catch, but if you take away that 44-yard touchdown, if he doesn't catch it or he drops it or something, that 44-yard touchdown would be 11.4 points. If you take away 11.4 from the Detonators 144.3. Do you know what you get? You get 132.9, which was the Isotopes score this week. And that would have been a tie. Possibly the second tie between the Isotopes and the Detonators. As you probably remember, we had one a couple years ago, and thought, "Wow, that'll probably never happen again, at least for another 10 years." And if Benjamin had not gotten that touchdown, the exact right yardage for that touchdown, we could have possibly had a tie here in this matchup. How crazy would that have been? Oh, anyway, you guys are probably sick of me talking already, and I'm just in the first matchup. Quarterbacks in this matchup: Stafford versus Eli Manning. Stafford 41.6, Manning 36.5. Wide receivers, Detonators, again, he had Mike Evans, T.Y. Hilton, and Kelvin Benjamin. This actually could have been a little bit worse. Could have been, so this matchup probably shouldn't have been as close as it was, because T.Y. Hilton got hurt, and also Gronk got hurt, and he ended up with 0, as we'll get to later on. But so Evans got his 30. T.Y. only had 8 points since he got hurt and never went back in. Not to mention the fact that he dropped a wide open, all by himself, down the sideline pass that would have been an 80-yard touchdown, guaranteed. He was running free down the sideline, wide open, and he just somehow dropped it. So he catches that. This is no contest here. Again, Kelvin Benjamin with his touchdown, plus he had another catch for a couple yards. He ended up with 13.3. So what is that? A little bit over, about 52 points from your 3 receivers, which absolutely crushes the Isotopes receivers this year. This week and this year, just a... Jarvis Landry, 8.7, pretty much where you can pencil him in for every week. Cooks, again, 0, and Cobb, 10. So only 19 points combined, 19 versus 50 for the wide receiver matchup here. Running backs, we had DeMarco Murray and LeGarrette Blount for the Isotopes. Detonators had Jordan Howard and Dion Lewis. Howard, 84 yards. Lewis, 24. So about 10.5 points there, almost 11. Murray, 43 yards, no touchdowns. LeGarrette Blount, 67 yards, no touchdowns from him. So just over, exactly 11 points from the 2 running backs there. Tight ends, Gronk, again, he got 0 versus Jordan Reed, who had 31.5, who went absolutely nuts after looking like he was going to be done for the year. Coming back into the game and catching 10 passes, 2 touchdowns, 31.5 points. Flex plays, we had Spencer Ware versus Sterling Shepard. And Shepard actually did not catch any passes, but fortunately for you, you had him in the flex. He had a 22-yard rush. So those were the only points you got from him. Spencer Ware, 11.6. Kickers, we had Crosby versus Janikowski. Crosby 9-7 according to Yahoo. As always, it's a little bit more than that thanks to the fractions. And then defenses, we had Buffalo for the Isotopes. I think if I remember correctly, they got 14. Detonators started the Steelers defense in a matchup where they got a break by playing against Tolzien from the Colts, the backup quarterback. So you plugged in the Steelers defense. Yahoo says 15. I believe the actual total was 30. What was the defense you actually would have... you were going to play San Diego defense, if I remember correctly. And that probably would have been a winner for you there, too, because they gave up... looks like they had 4 turnovers, and they only gave up 13 points. They won the game. You actually probably still would have gotten the win if you had used San Diego's defense anyway. But you do use Pittsburgh, and if the most frustrating thing about that Chiefs Broncos game, as entertaining as it was, and as fun as it was to watch, watching Kansas City get the safety and then immediately running that kickback for a touchdown. That was 14 points right there, missing out. And if I had used Kansas City's defense this week, they would have gotten me more points, enough points more than Buffalo got to have won this matchup. So, again, all little factors here that could have made this matchup go the other way, or could have made it a lot more lopsided in favor of the Detonators. But it went how it went, and the Detonators move up to 5-7. They are now in 8th place, while the Springfield Isotopes drop to 4-8, all the way down to 11th place, and they are officially done for the year in terms of any type of playoff hope. The defending champion, Springfield Isotopes, done for the season, eliminated from playoff contention. I'm sure nothing this year has made Brian more happy than defeating the Isotopes twice and knocking us out. So congratulations to you, Brian. I've only served this year to inflate your ego, I guess, for 2 weeks of the season. Maybe some of the only good weeks that you've had all year. So that is it for that matchup. Who do we have next? All right, the next matchup we had New Gods Mad Titans going up versus Disco. Both of these teams fighting for their playoff lives here. Disco, one of the many 4-7 teams who has to win out his schedule to have even a remote chance of making the playoffs, while New Gods Mad Titans, he has been sitting on 6 wins for I think 2 or 3 weeks now. All you need to do is get that 7th and not lose your last 3 games of the year. Just got to get that 7th win, but once again, you were not able to do it, as Disco keeps his playoff hopes alive. The final score here, 168.8 to 121.75. So about a 47-point margin of victory here. And let's take a look and see where those 47 points came from. Quarterbacks, New Gods actually went with Dak Prescott this year for the first time, I think, over Derek Carr and Phillip Rivers. And he was actually the lowest scoring of your 3 quarterbacks, but not by much. They were all right in that 40-point range. Prescott 40.65, Rivers had 43, and Carr had 48. So you weren't going to win with either one of those 3 guys anyway. But as you may know, we are getting here to the nitty-gritty of the playoff hunt, and every point you can get is might end up mattering when it comes down to figuring out the standings here after Week 13. Disco, he had Sam Bradford because Andrew Luck was out again. He didn't. I can't figure out why he didn't start. I don't know why he left A.J. McCarron on his bench, but he decided to go with Sam Bradford, who got 39 points. So pretty much even there on your quarterbacks. Wide receivers, Disco had DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas, and Tavon Austin. Hopkins, 12, Thomas, 9 for 108 and 2 touchdowns. He was over 30 points. And Tavon Austin, 4 for 45 and a touchdown. So that is 46 and 12, 58. So about 59 points from your 3 receivers. While New Gods Mad Titans, he had Doug Baldwin, Larry Fitzgerald, and Terrell Pryor. Baldwin, 10.5, Fitzgerald, 9.5, and Pryor, 19.1. So it looks like you got about just under 40, just under 40 from your 3 receivers combined. Running backs, Disco had Gurley and McCoy. Gurley, 50 yards. McCoy, 103 yards and 2 touchdowns. So McCoy, that's what, 25 points. So 30 from your running backs. While New Gods Mad Titans, he went with, is it Damian Williams? I'm not even sure. From Miami, he had 7 yards, and Melvin Gordon from San Diego, he had 70 yards. No touchdowns from him this week, so you got 7.7 from your 2 running backs. So that's probably the biggest difference here. And then, we had tight ends. Antonio Gates for New Gods Mad Titans, who scored a big 0. And Kyle Rudolph, who got 15.4. So a big 15-point difference there between your tight ends. But then Disco also started another tight end in his flex spot, which was Eric Ebron, who, much like Antonio Gates, he scored 0, while New Gods finally getting Le'Veon Bell week to week in his flex play. He had 27.2. So a big difference there. Kickers, Hopkins 4 points, Bailey 8 points. And then we have defenses, Philadelphia for New Gods. They got whipped by Green Bay last night. I think the actual point total was, let me take a look at my notes, 3. 3 points from the Eagles defense. That always hurts. And Denver defense actually didn't do much better. Yahoo says 6. I actually think it might have been a little bit more than that because they did okay in terms of yardage surrendered. So let's see. But I think the Eagles defense has really been letting down New Gods Mad Titans these past couple of weeks. What was it? I think they scored 1 point or something. Yeah, I don't know if it was last week or the week before. But yeah, in that said 47 points difference here. Said there was a big difference between the running backs there, as Gurley pretty much got the same point total as Williams and Gordon combined, while 25 points from McCoy was pretty much all extra there for you. And I think just the wide receiver difference there was 59 to 30 or 40, something like that. 10, 20, 30, 40. Yeah, it was. So that was the difference there that made up, said about a 25-point difference between the running backs, and then a 10 to 15-point difference between your receivers there. So that was enough for Disco to get the win. He is now 5-7. He is in 10th place, while New Guys Mad Titans, he's He's at 500 now. He is 6-6. And he is still in the playoffs as of right now. He is in 5th place, but we'll have to wait and see what happens here this last week, whether he can get number 7 or not, and possibly, even if he does go 6-7, he still has a chance to make the playoffs. We have quite an interesting week 13 coming up here, which I will get to a little bit here at the end of the recap. That was that for this matchup. Who do we have next? We have the other teams that we're playing in a matchup here. For the loser would be eliminated from playoff contention, which was FC Bahorik, a.k.a. Darkwing Jut, versus Everybody Ertz. And unfortunately, there's a lot of Ertz going on for Everybody Ertz. That Michael Stipe sad face icon you got there is even sadder this week because Everybody Ertz gets the loss. Darkwing Jut, just like Disco, holds on, gets a win, keeps his faint glimmer of playoff hopes alive for one more week. Final score, 178.95 to 131.6. So that is again another 47-point difference. Interesting. Quarterbacks, we had Matt Ryan versus Mariota. Ryan 46 to Mariota's 39. Receivers, Darkwing Jut had Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Wallace, and Tyrell Williams. Beckham 27.5, Wallace 8.5, and Williams 21. So that is what, 48 and 8 is 56. About 57 points from your three receivers. While Ertz, he had Garcon, Parker, and Brandon Marshall. Garcon 8.3, Parker 9.4, and Marshall 18.7. Pretty similar stats for all these guys, except Marshall had a touchdown. So that is what, 17 and 18 is 35. About 36 points from your three receivers there. So pretty big difference there between wide receivers. Running backs, Darkwing Jut, once again going with the New York Giants combo of Rashad Jennings and Paul Perkins. Jennings 55 and Perkins 29. So that is about, 8.4 from your two running backs. And Ertz, he had Devontae Freeman and Doug Martin. Looks like Freeman, he scored touchdowns this week. He had 2 touchdowns. So the Devontae Freeman effect looks like it did not hold up this week, as everybody Ertz usually wins whenever Devontae Freeman scores touchdowns. But it did not happen this week. So he had 60 yards and 2 touchdowns, so that's 18 points. Doug Martin, 87 yards, and he lost the fumble, so 6.7. So that is 24.7 from your your 2 running backs. Tight ends, pretty close matchup here. We had Jimmy Graham versus Cameron Brate. Graham 10.7, Brate 8.9, so about a 2-point difference there. Another 2-point difference here in the flex play, as Darkwing went with Cordarrelle Patterson, who got 8.7, and Ertz at 6.6. So the 2-point difference there was in favor of Ertz for tight ends, and then it was in favor of Patterson and Darkwing in the flex play here. So those 4 guys pretty much all canceled each other out in terms of the matchup. Kickers, we had Hauschka for Ertz and Prater for Darkwing. 4 to 11 according to Yahoo in favor of Prater there. And finally, defenses, we had Houston for Ertz, who was up against San Diego. Looks like they had 1 sack, 1 turnover, but they gave up a lot of yards, and they lost the game, didn't do too well. Yahoo says 7. It was right around that, maybe 10. But then Darkwing went with the Giants defense, basically relying on the Giants this week, as he had Odell Beckham Jr., Rashad Jennings, Paul Perkins, and the New York Giants defense. So 40% of Darkwing's roster was New York Giants this week. But it worked out well because they were at Cleveland, did pretty well. 7 sacks, a bunch of turnovers. I think they might have gotten one of those turnovers for a touchdown. It's not showing it here on the Yahoo matchup page, but if I remember correctly, they did have a defensive touchdown. Yahoo says 28. I think it was definitely more than that. So, yeah. Darkwing, he won the quarterback spot. He won the receiver spot. Even though Ertz did win the running back spots there, and again, tight ends and flex plays canceled each other out, but then it swung back over to Darkwing in the kickers and the defenses there. So Darkwing, he moves up to 5 and 7. He is in 9th place, while everybody Ertz, he drops to 4 and 8, and he is now in 12th place, down at the bottom, possibly keeping that Phillip Rivers jersey for one more year, which it kind of only makes sense because I believe you were supposed to bring it to the draft and give it to Jimmy because he was last place last year, but you couldn't find it. You had it in storage somewhere, and you found it. So technically, it never left your possession, and I think you still have it. And it only makes sense that as long as the Phillip Rivers cursed jersey is in your home, in your possession, that you're probably going to end up at the bottom of the standings here. Although I don't want to get ahead of myself because it's quite, as much as it pains me to say this, it's very much possible that the Springfield Isotopes could drop to last place if everybody Ertz can get a win this week and the Isotopes lose. It just pains me to say those words. But anyway, that's that matchup. Let's see. Who do we have next? All right, much like the New Gods Mad Titans, we had Dub C. Hooligans, who I think at one point they were both 6-4, and basically just had to get one more win to make the playoffs and not go 0-3 in the last 3 weeks of the season. But so far, once the Dub C. Hooligans join New Gods Mad Titans in dropping to 0-2 over the last 3 weeks of the season so far, going up against, you know what? This team name. I'm just gonna, you know what? Trying to think here. I don't want to keep possibly mispronouncing the name. I don't want to call you the Huber Squashers anymore. So I'm trying to think of what some of the old names were. You know what? I got it. Since he passed away this week, we're going with one of Detling's old team names, Castro's Commies. We're going to refer to them this week instead of whatever it is, the Latin phrase that he has made his team name. They're Castro's Commies for this week, at least in for the next 3 minutes in my recap here. So Castro's Commies gets the win over Dub C. Hooligans. Score here 208.95 versus 140.6 for Dub C. So just rubbing salt in the wound there of Dub C. Hooligans this week. As quarterbacks, we had for Castro's Commies, Kirk Cousins going off for 83.5. Still Drew Brees. He was Drew Brees. He had 66.5. So despite that, almost half of Dub C's points came from Drew Brees all by himself there. Fortunately for you, you also had his running back Tim Hightower in the flex there. Looks like he had a receiving touchdown. You know what? I think it's only showing him as having 54 receiving yards. So I think that touchdown pass, which actually was from Willie Snead, even if it had been from Drew Brees, that still wouldn't have been enough to make any difference here, Kevin. Although I'm sure you would have taken those extra points. But so 83-66, huge quarterback matchup here. Wide receivers, Castro's Commies, he had Jordy Nelson, Willie Snead, and Amari Cooper. Nelson, 17. Snead looks like he had 5 for 38. And you did get the 4 points for that passing touchdown. The completion and the passing yards did not count. So that got you, 8 and 12.8 from him. And then Cooper only had 6. So that is 12 and 6 is 18, and 17 is 35. So about 35 and a half from your three receivers. While Dub C looks like he had Golden Tate, Steve Smith, and Jordan Matthews. Pretty similar numbers here for all three. Tate, 5 for 77. Smith, 4 for 20. And Matthews, 4 for 47. 12.5, 6, and 8.5 there. So about 27 points from your three receivers. Running backs, Castro had Jonathan Stewart and Kenneth Dixon. Stewart, 96 yards and 2 touchdowns, while Dixon had 49 yards. So that is about 22 from Stewart and 5 from Dixon is 27. So about 27 from your two running backs. Dub C, he had Lamar Miller and Smallwood from Philadelphia. Looks like Miller, he had 57 yards, but he lost the fumble. So he only got 3.7, which is the same thing that you got from Smallwood, as he had 37 rushing yards. So 3.7 and 3.7 is 7.4 from your two running backs. Tight ends, we had Castro's Commies with Greg Olson, who I mentioned before, having that 30-point game here and kind of trailing off these last 2 weeks. He got 8.5, while Dub C had Martellus Bennett, who couldn't really do too much in the absence of Gronk. He only had, actually, we had to cut some points off there because he somehow he had a 4-yard rush, so he only got you 5.2. Flex plays, again, Hightower, he had 18.5, and Castro went with Adam Thielen from Minnesota. He had 13.3. Kickers, this one went way heavily in favor of Castro's commies and Justin Tucker, who had he lived up to the hype that Detling has given him all year long as being the best kicker in the league, which I'm sure is only because he's on Detling's team this year. So I'm looking forward to seeing who the best kicker in the league is next year, which will be the kicker that Detling has on his team next year. Unless he decides to keep Justin Tucker, wouldn't that be a bold move? Keeping Kirk Cousins and Justin Tucker next year, that would be interesting. But anyway, he had 3 50-yard field goals. Yahoo says 19. It had to be a little more than that. But even though Bryant he was respectable, he had 9 points on Yahoo. Then defenses, we had Seattle, who I already mentioned, going up against Mike Evans there. They were at Tampa Bay. Even though they only gave up 14 points, they lost the game because they only scored 5 somehow. They had a safety, and they did have a turnover. And I actually think otherwise they did okay in terms of yardage and stuff. Yahoo says 17. It was right around there. While Arizona D for Dub C Hooligans, they only had 1 turnover and a couple sacks. They lost. They gave up a ton of points. They gave up a lot of yards. So I think it was right around there. I think it was actually 6, if I remember correctly. So pretty big differences there. Well, obviously in a 68-point margin of victory, Castro's commies going over 200 points. So a 68-point margin there. Not much that the Dub C Hooligans could do in this one here. Even though 140 has been enough to get you some wins this year, Kevin, it was not enough this week as you got crushed and you dropped, just like New Gods Mad Titans, you dropped to 500. You're now also 6-6. But much like New Gods Mad Titans again, you are still in the playoffs as of right now. You are in 6th place. If you win this week, you should be able to squeeze your way into the playoffs there. But that is no guarantee as you're going up against Gags, I think. So you got a tough matchup here. Praying for the best here. Trying not to finish the season 0-3. But yeah, Castro's commies, he is in, even with the victory, I think he dropped. Was he in 2nd place? Or was he? I can't remember if he was in 2nd or 3rd, but he is now in 3rd. And he is 8-4. Still sitting comfortable. 40 playoffs, and now basically just trying to hopefully for him, get a first week bye in the playoffs here. Speaking of first week byes in the playoffs, this next matchup is from Gags to Riches versus Mighty Midgets. Mighty Midgets, the number 1 seed, even though he ended up losing this matchup, he is still in 1st place. And Gags to Riches, despite the win, he doesn't move up to 1st. He is still in 2nd. Maybe he was in 3rd. I can't remember between him and Detling's team. But these are now the number 1 and number 2 seeds here going into the last week of the season. And this one actually ended up being pretty close on Monday night as Mighty Midgets had Aaron Rodgers and the Eagles kicker, Sturgis, he only had 1 PAT, but he did have 2 long field goals. So he was over 10 points there for you. And Rodgers was just under 60. So you got about 71 or 72 points when you needed, let me take a look at my notes here. You needed about, I think, the difference is about 72.5, but you only got pretty much an even 70 from Rodgers and Sturgis there. So it went from being a blowout to being heartbreakingly close there for the Mighty Midgets. But you ended up with a good score. I guess I should say what the scores were here. Gags to Riches, 182.3 to Mighty Midgets 179.75. So even though Midgets, despite the victory or despite the loss, you put up a big point total and you stayed in first place. And so really nothing to be upset about there. Said even in defeat, you still did good and remained in first place here. Wide receivers, Gags to Riches, Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, and Demaryius Thomas. Antonio, 32 points off of 3 touch. He only had 5 catches, but 3 of those catches were touchdowns. Julio, 7.5. Thomas, 11. So that is 18 and 32 is 50. About 50.5 points from your 3 receivers. While Midgets, he had Allen Robinson, Des Bryant, and Jamison Crowder. No touchdowns from any of those guys. One of them scores. This one goes the other way, but was not to be. Again, Allen Robinson, who I mentioned earlier, he had only 4.5 points. Bryant 12.2, and Crowder 16.8. So that is 29 and 4.5 is 33.5 from your 3 receivers. So Antonio Brown pretty much scored the same as your 3 receivers there. So that, and said only a 2.5 point difference here. That cost you, if anything cost you the matchup, it was probably that. As did I even mention the quarterbacks for Gags to Riches? I don't think I did. He had Cam Newton, who had, thanks to a long touchdown, to pad his stats there. He only completed 14 passes in this game. I think his fantasy point total was like 10 until the I don't know, it was in the fourth quarter when they finally decided to try and make a comeback there. But he ended up, he ended up with 30, just under 39. So a 20-point difference there in terms of quarterbacks. Running backs, Gags had Gore and Elliott. Gore, 28 yards. Elliott, 97 yards. Just couldn't quite make it to 100 there and get you that bonus. But he did have 2 touchdowns. So that's, 22 almost and 28. So just about 25 points from your 2 running backs. While Midgets had Carlos Hyde and Matt Forte. Looks like Forte had 27 yards and Hyde had 65 yards and a touchdown. So 12.5 plus 2.7 is about 15 from your 2 running backs. Tight ends, Midgets had Delaney Walker and Gags had Kelsey. Walker an even 14, Kelsey 18.1. Let's see. So yeah, if that Chiefs game does not go to overtime, I think that's the only person from that game that Gags had here. Oh, he had Demaryius Thomas too. I don't know if Demaryius did much in overtime there, but I think Kelsey in overtime is where he really went off there and padded his stats in that game, which was enough to squeak out the win here for Mighty Midgets, or I'm sorry, for Gags to Riches. Flex plays, good matchup. Again, David Johnson for Midgets, who's been steady all year long. Another 30 points from him this week. Over 100, he had over 100 receiving yards on 8 catches. Thank goodness for you. You put him back in the flex after, I think, bye weeks last week kept you from flexing him. He had 30 points there. I see he's got a Q next to his name here now, though, so might have to watch and see what he's going to do here these next couple weeks. I'm not even sure what his injury is. Let's see if we can take a quick look and see what it says. Dislocated finger. So just like David or Derek. Why do I keep saying David Carr? You can tell how long we've been playing fantasy here when I say David Carr off the top. This is the first name that comes to my head there, but it's Derek Carr now. So that he probably won't miss any time there. Good for you. While Gags, he had Rashard Matthews in his flex. Let's see, 15.5 points from him. Kickers, Gostowski versus Sturgis. Gostowski says 8, Sturgis says 10. Defense, Atlanta for Midgets versus New England for Gags. Here I see New England, they blocked a kick, so that could have been a difference there. Really anything was the difference here in a 2.5 point matchup here. So those 3 points. Said, well, I mean, the defense doesn't block a kick every week, and they did it this week here. So thank goodness for Gags there for you, getting that blocked kick. Yahoo says 16 from New England's defense. I think it was a little bit more than that. They did pretty well against the Jets there. While Midgets, he did not use Carolina. He went with Atlanta at home versus Arizona. Looks like they had a couple sacks and a turnover. Yahoo says 11. I think it was a little bit more than that. But said here, and once again, only a 2.5 point margin of victory. Was it New England's blocked kick? Was it Kelsey getting overtime points there? Was it, Midgets receivers not scoring any touchdowns or not doing? Said Robinson only 2 catches, and your whole receiving core, Midgets being equaled by Antonio Brown all by himself there. So big difference there. If Brown only catches 2 touchdowns, so really anything. If Cam Newton doesn't throw that long bomb and pad his stats and get that bonus, even if they had if Ted Ginn had been brought down at the 1 yard line instead of going in for the touchdown, no 3 points there. So, hey, I could keep going on about the differences here that could have changed the matchup here, but I won't. But anyway, again, like I said, Mighty Midgets, he stays in first place. Gags, he's in second. Both trying to keep the playoff buys. Pretty much, I think I think Detling's team is the only team that you're really fighting against for it. I don't have to take I think Tree's team might be, even if Tree's team wins this week and gets him to 8 wins, I think his point total, he's dropped now a little bit too far back from you guys to get him a possible bye for the first round of the playoffs here. And let's see, we just have one more matchup. Let's take a look. Again, Possum Magic, who I just mentioned, going up against Cobra Brianna. Cobra, again, fighting for his life. He gets the win this week. He is now 6-6. And Possum Magic, even though he's at 7 and most likely in the playoffs, he lost and he drops to 7-5. So the point total here was 136.3 to 120.35. Difference here was quarterbacks. I mean, Cobra, he's been on fire. He's been quietly on fire and climbing up the standings ever since he got Tom Brady. As much as made a fuss about him getting Ajayi, Ajayi hasn't really done a whole lot. He's had some decent games, but it's definitely been having Brady versus Bortles for Cobra that's made a difference here. Even if you take a quick look at these stats here, if Cobra had to start Bortles, that's like a 15-16 point difference there. That actually would have gotten Cobra a loss this week if he was still sticking with Bortles over Brady. Just the difference would only be like 0.05, but a loss is a loss, I have to say. Anyway, that's not what happened. Cobra got the win. Tom Brady, 52 to Roethlisberger, 37. Receivers, Cobra had Edelman, Eddie Royal, and Anunwa. Edelman, 16.3. Eddie Royal, actually a half of a point, because his only catch was for -6. And Anunwa, who had just under 22 points, he had a touchdown over 100 yards for him. So that is about 22 and 16 is 38. So about 38 from your 3 receivers. While Possum, his 3 receivers, actually it looks like it was pretty even there. Actually, he might have gotten the best of the receivers here, as he had Kenny Britt, Dante Moncrief, and Cole Beasley. Britt, 16.2, Moncrief, 16.5, and Beasley, 10.6. So that is about 42, 43 points from your 3 receivers there. Running backs, Cobra had Ajayi and Rawls. Both had about the same rushing yards, 38 and 45, but Ajayi did have a touchdown. So that gets you to about 15 points from your two running backs. While Possum, he had Kelly, I think it's Robert Kelly from Washington. No 3 touchdowns for him this week. Only 37 yards. And Jeremy Hill, he only had 21 rushing yards. Pretty much all of his points came from receiving this week. He had 12 receiving points. Had to chop those out. So you only got 5.8 from your two running backs. Tight ends, we had Fedorowicz versus Cook. Fedorowicz 8.2 to Cook's 1.7. So fortunately, you didn't need Cook to come through there on Monday night, Cobra, as he only had that one catch for 7 yards. Flex plays, Cobra had Theo Riddick, 10.8 for him, while Possum went with Sharp from Tennessee, but he only got 3.1. Let's see, what did Sproles end up with? You still have Sproles? Yeah, 10.4. So that would not have been enough to get you change the outcome here. Actually, it doesn't look like anything that Possum had would have been enough to change the outcome here. Possibly the Oakland defense. Can't remember exactly for sure what Miami did. But anyway, kickers. Possum had Catanzaro. He had 8 on Yahoo, while actually Cobra had Vinatieri, who actually got 0. So a break for you there. Defenses, again, Possum, he did not go with Oakland or Minnesota, who he's had on the bench, I think, the past couple weeks. He went with Miami. They were at home against San Francisco. It looks like they had a couple turnovers, won the game, but I think they actually gave up a lot of points and a lot of yards. Yahoo says 11. It was right around there, if not a little bit more. And as for Cobra, he had the Bengals defense. Even though they lost, they got that safety thanks to the final play by the Ravens, basically giving them the 2 points there, basically giving Josh 5 points. Looks like they had 1 turnover. They only gave up 19 points, not too bad, but they lost the game. So, Yahoo says 16. It was probably right around there, if not a little bit more. But it was enough to get the win here for Cobra, which he needed. And basically, if he can win this week, that could get him to 7 wins. Well, let's take a quick look. He's now in 7th place at 6-6, while Possum is in 4th place at 7-5. So I guess I should, so I was going to get into a little bit of the standings here and the final week matchups here to see what it looks like for the playoffs here. So let's take a quick look at the matchups and standings here for week 13. Let's see. Pretty much, well, as you know, Midgets, Gags, and Detling are all playoff teams, guaranteed. Treesice, almost guaranteed that you're in the playoffs because you are almost 100 points ahead of New Gods Mad Titans. You're 130 points ahead of Dub C, and you are 170 points ahead of Cobra. So Possum, even if you lose this week, and New Gods, Dub C, and Cobra all win, I don't think they're going to get enough points to cover that margin of difference there, the lead there for you in terms of overall points. So Possum, we can pretty much said even if you lose, you've got the spot, you've got a playoff spot. You are going up. Who are you playing? You're playing Ertz this week, so you might actually. I don't want to. Well, everybody Ertz, who is already officially eliminated. So let's take a quick look at what his projection is. Just over 100, because he's got Mariota on a bye, so he will probably plug in either Wentz or Carson Palmer. So that should make this matchup fairly even. He'll probably, I assume he'll put Crabtree back in there for somebody. So again, like I said, but Possum, win or lose, I think you have really no chance of getting a first week bye. But you're said win or lose, you're guaranteed a playoff spot here. Um, Even if Detling loses, I mean, you're behind Detling by about 60. So I think you're pretty much locked into that number 4 seed. So you're going to be playing whoever gets that number 5, which could be just about anybody who's left here. Let's see. Let's see. Who's the next team? New Gods Mad Titans. He needs to get a win to make a play. If he gets the win, he will definitely be in because his point total said he is 40 points ahead of Dub C, and he is 80 points ahead of Cobra. So even if they both win, even if all 3 of those teams win, I don't think Cobra is going to make up the 70-point difference or 80-point difference there to get you ahead of New Gods. So New Gods, you're playing the Isotopes. If you win, you are in. Most likely at the 5 spot. I don't think you might, or maybe you said if Dub C can win and outscore you by 40, you would drop to 6. But if you win, you would pretty much be clinched into that number 5 seed. If you lose, then it gets even messier here, as we have 3 teams who are 6-6. New Gods, Dub C, and Cobra. We have 3 teams that are 5-7. Detonators, Darkwing, and Disco. So let's take a quick look here. So if those we could potentially have where are the matchups? Yeah, we could potentially have 6 teams all finishing at 6-7, which would mean that if that's what happens, that all these teams finish 6-7, I believe that would bump. That would probably bump the Detonators, thanks to his point total, up to the number 6 seed, assuming. So he's ahead in points of both New Gods and Dub C Hooligans. He's ahead of New Gods by 40. So he actually could move to. Detonators could actually move all the way up to the 5 or 6 seed there from number 8 if everyone goes to 6-7 there. And Detonators are playing the Mighty Midgets. He is the first place team. He's playing for a bye, playing for the number 1 overall seed, regular season champion, which is money there. So that's what he's playing for. So he's a tough matchup every week. So Detonators, you got your hands full trying to get a win and just to get yourself to 6-7. Get Dub C. I think I mentioned this before. If he can get the win, he will most likely be in over Cobra, who also needs to win because there's a 40-point difference there. But Dub C is playing. He's playing the number 2 seed. He's playing Gags to Riches, so he's got a tough matchup. No guarantee there. And then let's see. We got FC Bahoric, who needs to win just to get to 6-7. He's playing Detling's team, who is in 3rd place, doing well this year. You need so yeah, Darkwing, you're still not out of it, but you got a tough matchup, which you absolutely have to win. Which I also need you to win by 12 or 13 points to make up for my failure last week in our bet between you and me and Brian and Detling there. So yeah, Darkwing, you're going up against Detling. Brian's against the Midgets, and then Disco, who needs to win. Both Disco versus Cobra, both of these guys need to win. Cobra, I mean, if he doesn't win, he's still hoping that all the other teams lose. the other 6 and 6s lose. Disco, he needs to win just to get to 6 and 7, and hope and pray for a miracle. So yeah, I think pretty much all of you though have a chance. Said if all of you guys end up at 6 and 7, depending on what happens this week. So Darkwing, he's ahead of Dub C in points right now. But he's the only one who's really close. Disco, he's pretty much even with Cobra, but he is about 40 points behind Dub C. Again, it said if all of those teams drop to 6 and 7, or well, some of you move up to 6 and 7. The two teams that would probably be in as of right now would be the Detonators and New Gods Mad Titans. Unless said Justin is only 25 points behind Jimmy, and he's ahead of Dub C. So, I mean, it could possibly be Justin. Said if he can win and get a big point total and have all those other teams lose. Let's see. Disco, you need to win over Cobra and knock them to 3 and 7. You need everybody. Well, you need Justin to lose. You need Brian to lose. You need Kevin to lose. You need so you need all those teams to go to 6 and 7, and you need the other 2 5 and 7s to lose because you are behind in points unless you can get a huge game this week. So that being said, all of that being said, the playoffs are going to be, I think, those first 4 seeds are going to be Jim, Gags, Detling, and Tree. I think that's going to be, I don't know what the exact order is going to be, but it's going to be those 4 guys. And then the 5 and 6 seed. My opinion right now is that I think it's going to go to Jimmy and Jimmy. I'm going to say Jimmy and Cobra. I think Josh is riding. I said he's been riding a winning streak here. Said I'm playing Jimmy. I don't like a lot of my matchups this week. I'm in a tough spot here. I've got some tough matchups. He's got some good ones. I honestly expect him to beat me this week, but I think that Cobra is going to beat Disco. Is what is he going to have Andrew Luck back? Still, that's a tough matchup. But I think it's going to be. I think Kevin's going to lose to Gags. So as of right now, those are my picks to get the number 5 and 6 seed. Is going to be Jimmy and Josh. So that means 2 teams from the East? Actually 3. It would be, I guess technically Jim is East, Gags is East, and Jimmy is East versus 3 from the West. So that kind of works out. Detling, Tree, and Josh. So 3-3. So those are my picks for what the playoffs are going to be in the 5 and 6 seed. Again, the first 4 seeds are pretty much those 4 guys. The standings might shuffle a little bit, but it's going to be those 4. So good luck though to New Gods, Dub C, Cobra, Detonators, Darkwing, and Disco. Because, said lucky for you, only the matchup versus Cobra and Disco is one where you're basically not playing against each other and knocking each other out here. So all of you have a chance to make the playoffs. Only if you win. Well, unless you said, you know what? That's enough rambling about all this bullshit because, you know what? I'm out. I don't even care. I don't even want to be doing this recap anymore. I left work tonight and I was like, oh, man, I gotta do the recap. I don't know. It's just all right. But I can't shirk my responsibilities here, even just because of my own personal feelings aside here. So that's it. Week 13, going to be exciting. All these matchups are great because they all have playoff potential consequences here for the standings here. Six players all fighting for 2 seeds, so going to be fun to watch. Good luck to all of you who still have a chance, and we'll see you back here next week to see who those last 2 teams are. Like I said, I think it's going to be Jimmy and Josh, but we'll see. All right, good luck to everyone, and again, we'll see you back here next week for the last recap of the regular season.